Radio Ecoshock.
Hi, I'm Alex Smith from Radio Ecoshock. Right now, Europeans are groaning and grieving through a second wave of COVID-19. Sickness and death are striking many parts of the world, with India setting a grim toll and the virus knocking on the door of Pakistan, another wave in Iran. Russia is not publishing credible statistics, but it's bad there. But the worst hit country in the world, without a doubt, is the United States of America. And as you try not to break down, hoping to survive another week, why talk about anything else? The natural world has not stopped responding to our alteration of the atmosphere. Buried in the horror news of the pandemic is another dark shadow. Have we just seen the first superstorms? Just last month, multiple hurricanes swept through the same zone of Louisiana. Then two Category 4 hurricanes smashed into Nicaragua and her neighbors. They're still recovering there, by the way. Millions of people are going hungry after those two storms swept inland. On the other side of the world, these megastorms are called typhoons. One of them strangely hit Somalia on November 22nd. The NPR headline reads, "Somalia's strongest tropical cyclone ever recorded could drop 2 years' worth of rain in 2 days." In the last 3 weeks, 3 big typhoons struck the Philippines. The last, Typhoon Vamco, flooded the capital Manila, broke dams, and submerged towns and countryside. Vamco carried on to Vietnam and then dumped unimaginable amounts of rain into the already soaked grounds further inland. So, we have big questions that need answers so urgently. Are there more killer storms now due to climate change? Are they following particular tracks? Why are these typhoons and hurricanes coming so close together? Why are inland cities getting those storm floods? That's unusual. Are storms bigger now than before? And how long until we reach the age of superstorms beyond any human experience, as predicted by Dr. James Hansen and dozens more scientists? How long will that be? I hope you are inside and safe. Let's take time to investigate the science, the myths, and the big-time threats posed by violent weather in an unstable world. This is Radio Ecoshock. Welcome aboard.
You're listening to Ecoshock Radio for the world.
Well, let's start off thinking about Hurricane Eta. We were distracted with politics and human health when that news bounced by. Eta was a strange beast. This storm popped up on the radar in the eastern Caribbean Sea on October 31st. There was a hard time naming it. So many hurricanes and tropical storms already boiled out of the Atlantic in 2020 that all 21 of the Roman letters used to name them were used up. And there have never been so many big storms in 1 year. Think about that. Is this the new stormy future under climate change? We will look at that science in just a few minutes. Eta arrived later than any hurricane before it, striking the Caribbean islands and then Nicaragua in the first days of November. Hurricane season is supposed to be over by then. In a hotter climate, nobody knows how long the new hurricane season will be. Is it like the fire season in California, getting longer and longer? On November 3rd, Hurricane Eta ramped up from a tropical storm to Category 4 hurricane in a matter of hours. From space, video of the hurricane boiling up, the sudden expansion of this monster, it's pretty scary to see. It is unsettling for everyone living near the coast to know that any tropical storm could reach high levels quickly without the warning that governments need to evacuate people. In Nicaragua, Eta stoked gusts up to 150 miles an hour. That's 240 kilometers an hour. This is the third most intense hurricane ever recorded in November. Another awful record broken. The rains were extremely heavy. Hills collapsed. Landslides buried roads and houses, fields flooded and rivers burst their banks through parts of Honduras, Guatemala, Cuba, and even as far south as Panama and Colombia. Thousands of people were displaced. Whole swathes of homes were left roofless and damaged. Power was out and not coming back anytime soon. All this is important because of what came just 2 weeks later. The election in Belize was still hampered by flooding 8 days later, and Eta was not a fast-moving storm. Remember, despite all their internal wind speed, as typhoons or hurricanes rotate, they have no power of forward motion of their own. These whirling banks of clouds and lightning are simply driven along by whatever local winds or upper atmosphere currents appear at that time. The Cat 4 Hurricane Eta became a rain-laden tropical storm that hovered for days over Central America. Before wandering over Mexico and out into the Gulf of Mexico as a weakened tropical depression that it became. Winds were down to 35 miles an hour or 56 kilometers an hour out over the Gulf. But that was not the end of Eta. While many people over the world were fixated on the American election results, Storm Eta reorganized in the Caribbean to hit Cuba on November 7th. Defying predictions, the great storm was blown north over the Bahamas and then into the south end of the Gulf of Mexico. Eta grabbed heat from the abnormally warm Gulf waters, don't you know, briefly became a hurricane again, then weakened to a tropical storm when it struck the west coast of Florida and drenched its way with flash flooding all the way up to the Carolinas and Virginia, killing 11 Americans. That was just the warm-up act. Just 2 weeks later, the latest Category 5 Atlantic hurricane ever recorded, note that again, struck the same part of Nicaragua again. Like Eta, Hurricane Iota was erratic, first showing as a weak tropical storm, then days later discovered as a Cat 2 hurricane over the Caribbean. Like Eta before, this storm exploded to Cat 5 strength in hours. Seasoned observers were startled. Storms this big, this late, so close together. We have entered a new territory. Climate change is showing a new face. Iota dumped epic amounts of rain and again landslides, roads out, flood stretch from Colombia to Mexico. Here's one thing we know. Whether you call them hurricanes or typhoons, these big storms are carrying more rain and taking it further inland than ever before. And yes, it's because of climate change. You should listen to my guest on the Radio Ecoshock show for November 25, 2020, because Professor Pinati Chakraborty is co-author of a new study published November 11th in the journal Nature 2020. The title is Slower Decay of Landfalling Hurricanes in a Warming World. Definitely worth a listen.
Check out the Radio Ecoshock website. We're at ecoshock.org.
So you might be in the extended path of major storms, even if you're not right on the coast. Panaki's description of research into storm tracks is important. It echoes what we find in a Washington Post article about a number of storms that crashed into the same region. The classic case is Louisiana, specifically the coastal area west of New Orleans, towards the Texas border. An unbelievable 5 named hurricanes hit Louisiana in 2020. These include Cristobal, Marco, Laura, Delta, and then Hurricane Zeta arriving on October 28th. Lake Charles, Louisiana was struggling to patch up roofs blown off by Hurricane Laura at the end of August when Hurricane Delta arrived at the very same communities a few weeks later. Residents were stunned after being beaten up and threatened a couple of times. Some may decide to leave what might be a new hurricane alley. Matthew Capucci of the Washington Post brought storm tracks into his article, and that was published November 17, 2020, following the second hurricane in Nicaragua, Iota. So Matthew chronicles the double hit of Cat 5 hurricanes Irma and Maria in 2017. The Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico is another hurricane magnet. Capucci writes, between Tulum and Puerto Morelos, a Category 5, 4 Category 4s, a Category 3, and 3 Category 2s had made landfall through 2019. In 2020, Delta and Zeta made landfalls as Category 2 and 1 storms, respectively. Ending that quote. So there's a whole science of hurricane tracks I'd like to dig into. Is it just the geography of ocean basins where the land juts in? What is it about the great Mississippi River Valley that draws so many storms into the interior states? Or should we look at the meandering jet stream, now changed in a warming world? So NOAA released an update on November 24th, 2020, and they said, quote, "In total, the 2020 season produced 30 named storms, top winds of 39 miles an hour or greater, of which 13 became hurricanes, top winds of 74 miles an hour or greater, including 6 major hurricanes, top winds of 111 miles per hour or greater. This is the most storms on record, surpassing the 28 from 2005, and the second highest number of hurricanes on record." Note that while the hurricane season is supposed to end on November 30th, it is possible to get big storms after that. As the future unfolds, we may see that assumption change to December 15th or who knows what. On the NOAA.gov website, the U.S. government agency says this about the cause of so many storms. "This is the 5th consecutive season with above normal Atlantic hurricane season, with 18 above normal seasons out of the last 26. This increased hurricane activity is attributed to the warm phase of the Atlantic Multi-Decadal Oscillation, the AMO, which began in 1995, and has since favored more, stronger, and longer-lasting storms since that time. Such active areas for Atlantic hurricanes have historically lasted about 25 to 40 years. An average season has 12 named storms, 6 hurricanes, and 3 major hurricanes. As we correctly predicted," NOAA writes, "an interrelated set of atmospheric and oceanic conditions linked to warm AMO were again present this year. These included warmer than average Atlantic sea surface temperatures and a stronger West African monsoon, along with much weaker vertical wind shear and wind patterns coming off of Africa that were more favorable for storm development. These conditions, combined with La Nina, helped make this record-breaking, extremely active hurricane season possible," said Jerry Bell, Ph.D., lead seasonal hurricane forecaster at NOAA's Climate Prediction Center. Now, I noticed that they explain this in terms of long-term cycles and hot sea surface temperatures, but why are those sea surface temperatures hot? And of course, during the time of Trump, I guess they couldn't talk about the climate change impacts there on the NOAA website. So we are left, my friends, with several big questions. Here are mine. Are hurricanes or typhoons actually stronger due to climate change? And are there more of them these days? Is that what we should expect as a new normal, if there is a new normal? Is the phenomenon of back-to-back hurricanes and typhoons new, or is it increasing? How do these 2020 storms relate to the big paper led by James Hansen predicting ultra-super hurricanes in the future? And that's something I'm going to talk about in a follow-up video to this one. So, starting with number 1, are there more global hurricanes? Apparently not. The Union of Concerned Scientists says, there has been little change, however, in the frequency of hurricanes globally. Roughly 90 hurricanes occur each year around the world, with by far the greatest number occurring in the largest ocean basin on Earth, the Pacific, end quote, from the Union of Concerned Scientists. So here's the kicker. The number of hurricanes or typhoons each year has been fairly consistent over a long average, even with warming, but when these storms do form, hotter sea surface temperatures tend to make more violent storms than before. Let's dive into a paper published March 15, 2013 by Greg Holland and Cindy Bruyere. The title is Recent Intense Hurricane Response to Global Climate Change. This 2013 paper, using models and satellite observations, came to this conclusion, and I quote, "A strong signal is found in proportions of both weaker and stronger hurricanes. The proportion of Category 5 and 5 hurricanes The proportion of Category 4 and 5 hurricanes has increased at a rate of about 25 to 30% per degree C of global warming after accounting for analysis and observing system changes." So let's get that again. The stronger forms, Category 4 and Category 5, increase by about 25 to 30% for every 1 degree C of global warming. So we're about 1 degree C warmer now than pre-industrial times, probably really over that, but that's what conservative science says. And conservative science again says we'll hit 2 degrees by what, 2070? So we'll get 25 to 30% more storms, more intense storms, Category 4 and Category 5, than even this stormy year within the lifetime of many young people today. That's what they're predicting. Let's go back to that quote. "This has been balanced by a similar decrease in Category 1 and 2 hurricane proportions, leading to development of a distinctly bimodal intensity distribution, with the secondary maximum at Category 4 hurricanes. This global signal is reproduced in all ocean basins. The observed increase in Cat 4-5 hurricanes may not continue at the same rate with future global warming. The analysis suggests that following an initial climate change increase and intense hurricane proportions, a saturation level will be reached, beyond which any further global warming will have little effect." Let me give that another shot. The analysis suggests that following an initial climate increase in intense hurricane proportions, a saturation level will be reached, beyond which any further global warming will have little effect. So there may be a lid to this phenomenon. That was from the paper by Holland and Bruyere. The storm picture as we warm is just not simple. The last sentence suggests there may be an upper limit to warming beyond which storms will not be further changed by more heating. We don't know. It's just a big experiment. Also, while there may be more Cat 4 or 5 hurricanes, there will be fewer Cat 1 or Cat 2 hurricanes. That suggests if storms develop, they will become much stronger and dangerous, but some tropical depressions may not develop into weak hurricanes at all. They call that bimodal intensity. Either it's weak and stays weak, or the storm boils up into monster hurricanes or typhoons. And these authors, they think it's a global signal, and so it's not limited to the North Atlantic versus the Central Pacific or the waters around Asia. However, the authors note several other studies and reports from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change will conclude the frequency of intense hurricanes will increase as the planet warms. Holland and Bruyere write, "The frequency of intense hurricanes will increase with future anthropogenic climate change. The increases are substantial, approaching a doubling in frequency of Cat 4 and 5 hurricanes for each degree C in global warming." Now, I wish I could get that into headlines in the New York Times and onto every television news broadcast, that we could see a doubling of Cat 4 and Cat 5 hurricanes for each degree of global warming. We may warm this 1 degree already. We may go to 2 degrees soon. We could easily go to 3 degrees by the end of the century. Unless there is a lid on this increase, they could double and then, of course, quadruple. So not all scientists agree with that, and predictions are particularly hard for the Pacific typhoons. Even the IPCC remains unsure of the forecast for more storms. And we have to be careful, as scientists and as citizens trying to inform ourselves, not to jump to conclusions based on this year's extraordinary weather or storm you have been through personally. We need to cross-check with the records to see whether there really are more storms or not. The respected scientist Kerry Emanuel got into this situation around 2005 after a string of very serious hurricanes, especially ones hitting Florida with big damage. He predicted more hurricanes as the new normal, but a number of years that were very quiet in storm activity followed. Later, given another decade of observation and science, Emanuel modified his position. He says, "We cannot be sure of having more storms, but those which develop would be stronger because of climate change." That has been verified by a continuing series of scientific papers and, unfortunately, by our experience. The report from the Climate Change Impacts in the United States, 2014, from the U.S. government states, the intensity, frequency, and duration of North Atlantic hurricanes, as well as the frequency of the strongest hurricanes, have all increased since the early 1980s. Hurricane intensity and rainfall are projected to increase as the climate continues to warm. The latest science, including from James Cawson at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, says climate change is making storms stronger. In 2020, he told the New York Times, quote, "There's this remarkable building body of evidence that we're making these storms more deleterious." So deleterious is kind of an upper level word for really bad damage that hurts a lot of people. But maybe now we can add a possible rule that we might see a doubling of Cat 4 or 5 storms with each degree C of warming. If that simple rule is true, and Earth warms another degree C, we could see twice as many violent hurricanes. If we go 3 times, well, that may be 4 times as many storms. Would that be many months of hurricanes back to back, as recently experienced in Nicaragua and the Philippines? We may have to live through it to find out. Well, let's end this first video there. This is Radio Ecoshock. I'm Alex Smith. I have a lot more to say about this new type of hurricane during the times of climate change. We'll begin with back-to-back hurricanes, and then we'll look at James Hansen, the former head of NASA's Goddard Space Institute, talking about the new age of super hurricanes. Have we reached the threshold that he projected? Are we getting the first ones showing up now? So stick with me, and stick with Radio Ecoshock at ecoshock.org, where you can listen to this whole radio program, including an interview with Pinaki Chakraborty about how the storms are going further inland with more rain. Thank you for listening.
You're listening to Ecoshock Radio for the world.
I'm Alex Smith. Get it all at our website, ecoshock.org.